Hi and welcome to Knit with Hannah. I'm Hannah, I'm a knitting natter to help you knit with ease, confidence and joy. Today I'm being very joyful and I'm getting some completion energy. I've needed this for a while and I'm completing a couple of things that I started in December when I've been sorting out old patterns and knitting them up, and I've wanted to finish these on camera for you so you can see what I'm doing and see the completed patterns as well. So I got my scissors and I got my big needle because I'm knitting with chunky yarn and super chunky yarn. Let's get to it. Pull out your patterns that need completing, or indeed just pull out your knitting and we can do some finishing together. I'll see you inside. Let's get to it. This big fluffy white thing is a scarf, and what I'm doing is sewing the pockets on. So we have one pocket already in place and another pocket ready to go. This is the leaf pocket scarf that I created eons ago when I was selling what I was knitting. So instead of using other people's patterns, because I couldn't find any with licenses, I decided, because of my knitting experience, to sit down and make my own. So I did. What we're going to do is just make sure that these pockets actually sit on the matching side of the scarf. So we're not going to have one on one side and one on the other. Otherwise, I'll have to unravel all of my sewing and start again. But yes, they're going to sit and hang opposite each other. So what I want to do is actually make them sit like that so that they are opposite each other in that way as well. What we can do is wear them so they're like that, or wear them so they're like that. Doesn't really matter. But here we have the first pocket in place, and I now just have these two ends to help me sew it in. I also have this one if I need it as well. So what I'm going to do is kind of start from one end and then start from another end and make sure that it matches up with the other side, the pocket on the other scarf end. I've been meaning to do this for so long, and I've wanted to do it on camera. That's the thing. I knew I wanted to do this on camera. Let's count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So that first stitch goes in there. See that? First stitch matches up with that one. There. Okay. That is a great start. And now I need to go all the way down to there. Just taking that edge along the side of the border of the scarf. So I would do that just with a little bit of a slip stitch. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be hidden or anything. It's just picking up pieces of the pocket and sewing them to pieces of the scarf. This isn't an exact science because I'm not sure anyone's done it before. Certainly not like this. I was watching people knitting leaves, and I thought, because I just got hold of this big super chunky yarn all those years ago, and I'd not really knitted with it before. I was amazed at how small, intricate things could look very different in large, super chunky yarn like this. So I decided to just have a go at knitting some stuff that was usually knitted with very small, thin yarn. And so this kind of leaf, you kind of see it when people make flowers. You knit a leaf and you knit a flower and you put it around a pipe cleaner or something. Or you knit a leaf kind of into the pattern of a jumper, so it looks like there are lots of leaves all over the jumper. So it's like a lace weight, a lace pattern jumper, or a shawl, for example. So I I was looking at all these things and I thought, okay, well, try it with super chunky yarn and then you can see what you can do with it, because I had no idea what I was going to do with it at that point. And I wanted to know I could knit something like an accessory. And I'd seen out in the world of fashion a lot of big, white, really thick scarves. Teenagers wearing them everywhere. So I thought, okay, I'll combine the two. And that's how this kind of came about. And I have changed the pattern. You will probably be aware that in the last 6 months, I was going through lots of patterns. We've just had the fingerless mittens pattern start in the knit along. That was for DK mitts, and that was my very first fingerless mitts pattern. That's way over 15 years old. This one is a similar era. And I released a beret and mittens and a couple more hats as well. And they are all there over on the website, but they're all archive patterns and they've been around for a long time. Just like you would find in the Hat Knitting Bootcamp, Lace Cable Mastery and Crafty Cables and Lace Wizardry. They are not as old, but they've been sitting around in my shop, in my Knit with Hannah portfolio, for a good while now. So I just wanted to give them a new sense of life, and I knew that I wouldn't want to release some of them without reworking the patterns, and this has definitely had a rework. I've made it look very different, given it a new lease of life, and changed the way that it's knitted so that it hangs better and it wears better. So hopefully, not just as a knitter, but as a user of the finished scarf, it will be more enjoyable. Okie dokie. I'm coming around here to the bottom of the lace here, leaf, and I'm going to just sew that along the edge here. There we go. I'm hoping I've got enough yarn. This you can see is the cast off edge. I tell you what I really love. One thing I really love when I'm knitting is actually getting, you've seen me do this before, just bringing all of my patterns and projects together that needs to be finished. I love sitting there and just doing that. And I might come to a point where I've got 3 projects that need finishing and I just fancy doing all of it together. Because there are some times when I feel much more able to do the knitting than I am to do the finishing, so it's more comfortable for me to do it like that. And of course, the beauty of this is I wanted to do some of this on camera. And I will make sure ASAP that these patterns are linked below so you can knit them for yourself if you want them. Granted, if you're watching this in the spring, you may not want a thick scarf like this, but it's an ideal knit. Certainly to get ready for next winter, and to knit as a gift for next winter as well. Okay, I'm going to see how this little end does. I'm not convinced that was really long enough to sew in, but we'll see how it lasts over time. There we go. You can't see it now, fingers crossed. Okay, so this other side here, I'm going to take it up just along the edge and over. So at this point we're going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 notches. So that would just take me up there. as you can see. This is the kind of thing where you could stick your phone. I can't stick my phone because I'm filming with it. But what I do with my mittens is I do this, like you would with a pair of socks. And they go in my pocket all the time. So that's a very large pair of mittens. But doesn't that fit properly? It does. It's fine. That's a large pair of mittens. I'm sure you have smaller pairs. Okay, let's go up this edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just take it a little bit further. And it is a very simple in-out stitch that I'm using here. It's nothing important. And this bit here is where I had to change the yarn halfway through the... no, it wasn't. I didn't have to change it. There was a knot in the yarn, so I couldn't... I suppose I could have stopped knitting and just started over, but I didn't. But that will be sewn in there. You won't see it. Okay, a couple more stitches and I think we're done. It's a lot quicker than you might imagine, just doing something like this and finishing off. Okay, hand will fit in and it stretches because it's a knitted fabric and the nature of it. And I'll just send that through the other side. But yeah, it's a much faster process than you might think. It looks quite daunting, and it's something that certainly, because I'd not sewn the leaves on for a very long time, I procrastinated over it before I did the first one, most definitely. And there's this kind of question, oh, can I do it? Will I mess it up? Was it really worth all of that knitting if I just mess it up now? It's definitely worth trying, even if you have to do it a couple of times to make sure it works properly. And by the way, the leaves are knitted first before you knit the scarf. And then you know how much wool you've got, and you just keep knitting, and then you cast off when you run out of yarn. The whole idea of this scarf is to make life easy. There we go. And I will just sew this piece of yarn in at the end here. I wish I'd left more length on those threads from the yarn, the leaf. That was a mistake. I know I had more on that one. Probably the one I've just did was the first leaf that I knitted. So I'm just weaving in diagonally, then I'll go diagonally in the other direction. And this is on the side that doesn't have the leaves on. Yep. I would rather have had a long thread like that, just to secure it when I'd sewn in the leaves. There we are. So that is the leaf pocket scarf completed. That's a good relief. That's a please. I'm pleased with that. So we have pockets on both sides. They match. They sit opposite each other. And it's a really long scarf. Look at that. I'll try and get some photos and I'll show you that on the screen now that it's completed. Now, the next one is another scarf, and this matches a hat, and I will just get up and find that so I can show you the hat. Here we are. There's the matching hat. I made this with chunky yarn. Ugh. It wasn't actually that long ago. It was probably 8 years ago, probably something like that. This was simply because I wanted to just make something more interesting with the kind of pixie shaped hat. So I picked up some chunky yarn and had some fun with it, with the zigzag on it. So there's a zigzag hat and a zigzag scarf to go with it. It's the scarf that needs finishing. Now, I use leftover yarn to knit most of this, and frustratingly, I have probably about a third of the stitches left on the needle. So I need to just use the beginning of the next ball and finish off that seam. And then I need to sew the back on. The idea of this scarf is that it's double thick, not only because there's the ferrule on it, but because of the way that it's knitted. And I mean, any way that a ferrule scarf like this is knitted, it's going to happen to a point. The edges will roll up because of the fact that the bit where there's ferrule is that bit thicker, so it's going to curve around. So the idea is that you knit a back piece and sew it on. So that's what the plan is for today. But I need to cast off first. Finish off the casting off. And I need to find some yarn. Ugh, I don't need that much yarn, that's annoying. And all this has come out. There we are. Right. So this is the point that I got to. And I might as well just leave that bit there and carry on here. So that's the last stitch I knitted. And I need to start knitting that one with the new piece of yarn. So there aren't that many stitches to cast off, I don't think. I haven't counted them. Maybe 50. This is the adult size scarf. There are more sizes for this actually. And the zigzag pattern works with the different sizes. So originally I only made it for children, but it was requested of me when I first made it that I change the pattern for adults. So this definitely works for adults, this larger size. That's what I've done with some of the other patterns as well actually. I've changed them so that there's an adult option too. I've actually kind of fallen in love with this yarn. I was knitting with it most of the winter. It's the new one from Rowan, Mode at Rowan. That's their designer yarns. I'd call it that, I suppose. But it's a chunky wool to a point where it's just that little bit chunkier than your general Serdar or Stylecraft or Drops or chunky yarn. Chunky is very weird because there's a big range of whether it's still chunky or not. It's a chunky yarn from say a 6mm needles up until 9, and then when it gets to something like 10mm needles, they'll say, oh, it's a super chunky now. But that's quite a large range and quite a difference in thickness. So a general chunky yarn is something like 6.5mm needles generally. But this one is for 7. And I thought, okay, we'll trial it and see what works, see whether it works. And for all of my chunky patterns that I've knitted in the past, it's been fine. They probably are a little bit larger than the original patterns, but honestly, it's not mattered one jot. You don't notice when you're putting on a hat or a scarf that it's ½ an inch larger than the original. And no one's going to know. It still looks as good, and the colours are lovely. So yeah, I've actually been really happy with it. Very happy with it. I think the one chunky that I've been knitting with over the winter that was right on stitch count was the West Yorkshire Spinners Retreat chunky yarn. But you can't find many actually, because it's not that brilliantly popular yarn to be knitting with. Most people will be knitting between 4-ply and Aran. And then of course there's a lot of sock yarn that's sold as well. Look at that, I finished casting off and I didn't even realise it, I was just sat here chatting. Okay, I'm going to give myself a lovely long length, so I do have space to sew in the scarf. Okie dokie. This is going to be a fun job. It's going to take a while, I think, but actually I will put some music on for you while I'm doing it, and I will definitely speed it up, I think. Because you watching me sew this whole scarf together might take a while. But get your things that you need to do as well. Get out some finishing that you need to finish, seams that need sewing, ends that need weaving in, all that sort of stuff, and we can do this together. Okie dokie. Okay then, let's do this. As you can see, there was a join in the pink yarn that couldn't be avoided. This is where I did the casting off, changed the casting off. I'm just going to tie those in together. And I think I will sew those in before I get started on the main seam. A bit of weaving in ends never did anyone any harm. By the way, if you're interested in the knit along, we did get started on Saturday. The pattern and the knit along will be available in a couple of weeks' time once we've finished. You can actually go and look at so many different knit alongs that we've done in the past, and just jump in whenever you feel like it, because we even did mitts last winter actually. But there's all the tutorial videos there, so it's like a mini course. You go through that. And then we have the podcasts once a week that you can listen to and kind of find inspiration for the week of knitting. And that gets you going and ready for the week. But they're still there. When you buy the past knit along, then you can listen to that as well. And it will keep you knitting, keep you going with the knit along, see how you're getting on. And just kind of keep you on track. I know what it's like. I knit things and then something happens and it doesn't quite work out, or I need something else, or you know what it is. Right, we might have to do this sewing in with 2 or 3 pieces of yarn. I'm probably trying to do it all with one will be a bit of an impossibility. I'll see how I get on. But what we're actually doing is sewing one stitch to one stitch. So it's not like we've got to figure out how to keep it in place or anything like that. We will come back, I think, and do the edge. And there isn't an edge piece there because that was a cast on and a cast off on the other edge, on the other end. Let me see how long a piece I've got. No, I haven't got enough here on that end. We'll do one bit at a time. Let's do the top piece. Okay, so we are sewing it up. So we have a matching piece at the top and the bottom. So we've got 2 garter stitch rows there, 2 garter stitch rows there. And that's where we're sewing it in. I'll see how far I get before this length of thread annoys me, and then I might shorten it. And you have to remember at this point that stitches aren't, that's one stitch, one stitch, one stitch, one stitch. Both of those combine to make one stitch. Both of those combine to make one stitch. So you have to kind of skip one when you're sewing in like this. And the casting off edge, each stitch looks like a little leaf shape. I figure out how to hold it so it's comfortable and I can see what I'm doing. Right. You see what I'm doing here is taking the top part of the stitch and piece of the casting off stitch, the top part of the stitch and the casting off stitch, the top part of that stitch and the casting off stitch, and it all sits together quite happily there. Stitch, 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 stitch. made a mistake back here. I started picking up the previous row. So I'm just gently teasing it apart and pulling out the yarn until I get back there. It wasn't far, it's just up here. You can see I've got two rows of stitches here, and then I suddenly have 3. Gently tease it apart and then pull it out. Tease it and then pull it out. Just a couple more stitches. And there we are. I need to pick up that one next. I went to a knitting group with my friends this weekend, and one person brought along a big shoebox full of patterns that someone had given her. They didn't know what to do with. They were all from our previous generation, so it's the kind of patterns that my grandma shared with us when we were knitting in the 90s and noughties, and it was my auntie actually, she brought them all down. And they were all my grandma's patterns, and I know I've shown you one of my grandma's books at some point. I think that was when I was going through the studio and sorting through all my books last summer. So do go and have a look at that if you want to. But it's really interesting how the patterns are very classic and simple, and the shapes, it's a classic and a simple shape. So actually you probably only want a few patterns and you've sorted. And there's patterns, and you can see how they've been reworked to look like, the photos make them look like a school v-neck jumper, that sort of thing. But it's literally pretty much the same pattern. It's just a v-neck and it's got multiple sizes. There's one set of patterns there that reminded me of a glove that I knitted for a guide badge, knitting guide knitting badge, that was it, the guide knitting badge. And the pattern is, you knit one finger, you sew it up, you knit the next finger, you sew it up, you knit the next finger, you sew it all up. So it's all done on flat needles, and it's got lots of seaming in it. It's not done on double pointed needles. Some glove patterns were, but there were quite a few glove patterns that weren't done on single pointed needles, that weren't done on double pointed needles. And you sewed the seams, and that was perfectly acceptable. So it was an interesting take, and I wasn't expecting to see that, but yeah, they were out there. All these patterns for gloves with seams in them. Perfectly comfortable, perfectly wearable. Keep your hands warm. Right, I'm going to stop with that piece of yarn. I'm going to just weave that in on the back here, because I don't want to run out so much that I can't actually do this with it. I've just pulled out another piece of yarn from the end of that ball, just because it means I don't have to mess with all of the ends up this end. They can be used for other things when I get down there. I might as well complete this with fresh yarn, and I'd rather not suddenly start sewing things up in the other direction. If I start sewing from this end and coming in that direction, then I'm just going to lose my flow. I feel that I'll be much better off coming sewing in the same direction, so I know which stitch I'm picking up next and it all sits nicely together. Okay, so I've just been weaving in that end I'm going to start with, and I'll come up here and I need to pick up that stitch and go from there. There we are. Now along this line of sewing, there is the possibility that I'm going to miss one stitch on one side or the other, because that's a lot of sewing and I might not be quite even when I get to the other end. We'll see how it is, but it's easy to just even it out if it's just 1 or 2 stitches and no one's going to notice. Now, you may have noticed I am stopping occasionally and trying to retwist this yarn, because as you go through and you twist one, you sew one stitch, the yarn starts unspinning itself, which sounds rather odd, but it does. So I'm just stopping occasionally to retwist it so that the stitches hold neatly and so that it's still easy to sew up. We're almost there, look at that. Cool, this is a relief. And we have the 2 ends to sew together, very short seams, and then a few ends to sew in, weave in. Look at that. We're pretty much spot on right at the end here. And the last stitch and the last stitch. There we go. So I do have enough yarn to just sew down the side here. What I will do first though is just sew in these ends, weave them in so that it's all on the inside. Just chop those ends off. And I'll sew up this side. and then there will probably be enough yarn from either one of these edges to sew up the other end. So this is just kind of a see how it goes kind of sewing. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing or following any rules here. It's just trying to sew it in so it looks kind of even. And we're allowed to do that. Just sew it up so it looks kind of even. There's your experienced professional knitter for you. There we go. So there's that edge sewn up, and that looks sewn together kind of even, doesn't it? I will weave in this end. That's looking good. And again, it's just a case of let's sew it up so that it kind of matches. And this isn't a fancy stitch I'm doing. I'm just going in and out. It can get too complex if you try to make it perfect. And I don't want to call anyone out, but very close to me, a member of my family is a perfectionist, and then nothing gets done. Oh, I'll do that by then. Oh, I'll do that by then. But it never does, because it all takes way too long. So there's no need for perfection. We want to see the final piece. You want to use the final piece. And knitting is a fabulous way to get over that perfectionism. It's a case of saying, oh wow, I did my best. It looks bloody good. Look at that. I love it. You know, it's that kind of feeling where you want to be really proud of what you have achieved and not notice or be worried about imperfections. Imperfections, if there are any, help everyone or help yourself realize that you're human. We are flawed, and that crafting and creativity is about uniqueness. It's about humanness. It's about it being handmade and imperfect. And I love that part of knitting, because so often the imperfection becomes one of the most important parts of the item, and actually becomes a design piece part of it that really draws the eye and shows the brilliance. So yeah, we don't need to be perfectionist when it comes to sewing in ends or any other part of knitting. If it holds together and we can utilise what we finished making, perfect. That's perfect in my eyes. Right, that's that. I was going to sit here and do something else as well, but should we just stick with scarves? Should we just stick with scarves for this video? Let's just stick with scarves for this video. Now, I know some of you will be asking, what about the jumper that I'm knitting? Now, you may well be aware, because I have mentioned it, possibly more in the membership than here on the main channel, that I've had a problem with my wrist over the last few months. So knitting lots of stocking stitch hasn't been helpful, and it is definitely starting to feel better. So that will be part of my knitting going forward. I have considered letting it go because we're moving into spring and saying, oh, we'll come back to it in autumn. But actually, I actually feel like picking it up and knitting it again. I really do. And now that I've noticed my wrist was kind of screaming out a bit and saying, what are you doing, Hannah? While I was sewing up that seam. But it's okay. It's fine. And that's one of the reasons I haven't done much knitting, and that the knit along took longer to prepare than I wanted it to. But we're there. And I found some finality with this. I'm really pleased. As soon as possible, I will get these patterns up and ready for you. And I will leave the links in the description below. And if they are up and ready right now, actually what I will do is leave a link to the category. I'll do a QR code on the screen for you for the category of the patterns over in the shop. So you can go and get these whenever you want them. Like I mentioned, there's this scarf, and there's these this hat and scarf in different sizes, and then there's the flower beret bobble mitts, the two-tone bobble hat. I think there might be something else as well, and I can't remember it. I've definitely been doing a lot of knitting this winter. Anyway, but yeah, so that's them. So there we go, we have the completed scarves. I'm so pleased to have finished them, and I will get out with Nick now and take some photographs for you, organise the website, and you should be able to see the patterns ASAP. If you would like to knit any of these, here's the leaf pattern scarf, leaf pocket scarf, and yeah, I've loved this ever since I created it all those years ago. But I have finished it and given it an extra look, given it an extra sparkle. Just made sure that the scarf part of it sits better, feels better, and works better than it did in the first draft, shall we say. This one is just the same as it always was. And actually, let me just put it on for you. Because we can get such cosy coats nowadays, you don't actually need a really thick, long scarf. That's a lovely one for fashion's sake. Come on. But this is perfect for just sitting underneath the collar of a coat, and it actually sits at a nice length. So I really like this, and it's extra thick for those colder days especially, because there's that double thickness of yarn. So go and knit this one if you want to. The hat that goes with it, like I mentioned, is available. Like I mentioned, the hat that goes with it is available in the adult size now too. So there you go, all sorted, nice and cozy. I'm going to take this off because otherwise I'm going to get too hot. It's just one of those things. We're also getting towards spring, but this will be an ideal knit to get done and ready for maybe any birthdays that you have early in the autumn. I also give finished winter knits to my sister for her birthday in May. Otherwise, she will get them at Christmas and then you have a couple of months to wear them. So as she'll wear them for quite a while, I have done that in the past. She's had fingerless mitts and cowls and things for her birthday in May. But yeah, see if you want to knit any of those. I'm glad we were able to finish some stuff together. I do hope you've enjoyed that, and save this because there are a couple of others as well. I will link those. Go and do some more finishing with me when I've been sewing seams and doing all sorts of other things in very similar fashion with some lovely music in the background. Okay, thanks for joining me today. I will be back soon. I have beginner knitter books to film for you. Also have another series that I'm creating. I did mention that, I think, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting that done. I've got some interesting ideas, but we're going to have fun with that. Just something. But I will film that and we'll kind of drop those out over the next few months. So we've got a couple of series for YouTube to go through, and I do want to carry on with my jumper. Yeah, at the moment we're going through the fingerless mitts knit along. That pattern will be available in the next couple of weeks once the knit along's finished, and that knit along will be all ready and waiting for you as a self-guided knit along. If now hasn't felt the right time for it, then you can jump in once we've finished and do it without the community, and you can do it whenever you like. So you'll get the pattern and everything ready for you. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you again soon. Bye for now. Happy knitting.